She was banished by her tribe for her body. Then a rancher did the unthinkable to protect her. It was not something she could control, nor did she ever understand why it mattered so much to others, but her body looked different from the other children in the village. Her skin had a unique pattern, her frame was slightly unusual, and her presence seemed to draw whispers wherever she went. While her parents tried to shield her from the judgment of the village, the people's curiosity and fear were constant. She grew up in a small, remote village where traditions and customs dictated every aspect of life. The village elders held immense power, deciding what was acceptable and what was not. From the clothes people wore to the food they ate, nothing escaped their scrutiny. The community was tight-knit and self-sufficient, but it was also unyielding. Differences were seen as mistakes, and mistakes were feared. Amara loved her village and its people, but she had always sensed that the more she tried to fit in, the more she was watched, measured, and judged. Her childhood was a mixture of tender moments at home and quiet suffering outside. Her parents, especially her mother, tried to fill her days with love and reassurance. "You are special, Amara," her mother would whisper as she tucked her into bed. "The world may not understand, but you must never forget who you are." Those words became Amara's comfort, a small light in the darkness of judgment and fear that surrounded her. Yet, even with her mother's gentle encouragement, the pressure from the villagers was relentless. Children would avoid playing with her, adults would stare, and sometimes the elders would mutter cryptic warnings to one another when she walked by. As Amara entered her teenage years, the whispers became more than just whispers. The village elders began openly discussing her in meetings that she could not attend. They spoke of curses, of omens, and of the danger her presence might bring to the village. Despite never causing harm, she was seen as a threat simply because she existed differently. Each day, the weight of the villagers' suspicion grew heavier. Amara learned to walk with her head down, to smile when necessary, and to say nothing when accusations were made behind her back. It was a lonely existence, but she had no choice. One particular morning marked the turning point in Amara's life. The sun rose slowly over the distant hills, casting long shadows across the village. Birds chirped in the trees, seemingly unaware of the tension brewing below. Amara was helping her mother in the small garden behind their home when a messenger arrived from the council of elders. His face was stern and his eyes avoided hers. "Amara," he said, his voice shaking slightly with authority, "the elders wish to speak with you." Her heart sank. She had feared this moment for as long as she could remember. The elders' hall was a place of solemn authority, filled with carved wooden figures and symbols of the tribe's long history. The air smelled faintly of smoke and incense, meant to signify wisdom and tradition. Amara stepped inside, her hands trembling, and bowed to the elders who sat in a semicircle. Each one wore a robe of deep colors, embroidered with symbols that represented their lineage and power. The head elder, a stern man with sharp eyes and a voice that carried weight, addressed her first. "Amara, you have lived among us for many years," he began, "but it is clear that your presence brings unease to our people. We have spoken and prayed, and the spirits have shown us that you cannot remain." His words were deliberate, leaving no room for negotiation. "For the good of the village, you must leave. You are banished." Amara's world seemed to shatter in that instant. She could feel the floor beneath her as if it were crumbling. The words "you must leave" echoed in her mind, repeating over and over. Her parents tried to speak, to plead on her behalf, but the elders would not be swayed. Tears welled in Amara's eyes, and she felt a hollow emptiness settle in her chest. She had lived her entire life in this village, and now, without warning, she was being cast out. Packing her few belongings was the hardest part. She gathered what little she owned, a small bundle of clothes, a few personal keepsakes, and a necklace her mother had given her at birth. Each item carried memories, reminders of the life she had loved and lost. As she stepped outside for the last time, the villagers watched silently. Some avoided her gaze, others whispered behind their hands, and a few children stared wide-eyed, not fully understanding why she was leaving. The journey into the wilderness was daunting. The village was surrounded by thick forests and rolling hills, a landscape both beautiful and dangerous. Amara walked alone, each step heavy with sorrow and uncertainty. She thought of her family, her friends, and the life she had once known. She felt anger simmer within her for the unfairness of it all, but also a deep sadness that seemed to weigh on her very bones. The world beyond the village was unknown, and yet she had no choice but to face it. As she traveled deeper into the forest, Amara relied on every lesson her parents had taught her. She remembered how to find edible plants, how to collect water from streams, and how to build a temporary shelter from branches and leaves. Her body ached, and the hunger gnawed at her, but she refused to give up. She told herself that she was stronger than the fear and the rejection, that she could survive even when all odds seemed against her. Night fell and the forest came alive with unfamiliar sounds, the rustle of leaves, the calls of nocturnal creatures, and the distant roar of a river. Amara found a small clearing and built a makeshift shelter. As she huddled beneath the branches, she thought about the life she had lost and the uncertain path ahead. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams of the village and the faces of those who had turned against her. She woke at dawn with the rising sun, feeling both fragile and determined. Days turned into weeks as Amara struggled to survive in the wilderness. She learned to move quietly, to listen to the forest, and to rely on her instincts. Each day was a battle, but she discovered a strength within herself that she had never known. She realized that while the village had rejected her, she could still find a way to live, to grow, and perhaps even to thrive. Her body, once seen as a curse, became her ally in navigating the dangers of the wild. Despite the hardship, Amara never lost hope entirely. She often thought about her mother's words, repeating them to herself like a mantra. "You are special. You are strong. You are not defined by what others see." These words gave her courage, and she clung to them as she faced each new challenge. Slowly, she began to see the wilderness not just as a place of exile, but as a place of possibility. She could make it her own, create a new life, and discover who she truly was beyond the judgments of others. Amara's journey was far from over, but the first part of her story, the banishment and the struggle for survival, set the stage for something greater. She had been cast out, judged unfairly, and left to face the world alone. Yet in that solitude, she began to uncover her own resilience, courage, and determination. Though her heart ached for the life she had lost, she also began to feel the first sparks of hope for the life she could create. Amara had survived the first days after leaving her village, but life outside was far harsher than anything she had ever imagined. The forest that initially seemed alive with beauty soon revealed its dangers. Nights were cold, and the sounds of creatures moving in the darkness kept her heart racing. Hunger gnawed at her constantly, and her body ached from long hours of walking and searching for food. Yet, despite the exhaustion, Amara refused to give in to despair. She reminded herself that she had no choice. The forest was now her world, and survival depended entirely on her courage and determination. She quickly realized that surviving in the wild required more than just willpower. She had to pay attention to everything around her, the rustling of leaves, the patterns of birds, and the flow of streams. Each day she gathered small amounts of food, berries, roots, and occasionally, edible plants she had learned about as a child. Some days she went without eating at all, and the pangs of hunger reminded her of how much she had relied on the comfort of her village without realizing it. Yet, even when her stomach rumbled and her energy waned, she pressed on. Every step she took was an act of defiance against the injustice she had endured. Amara found temporary shelters wherever she could. She learned to use fallen branches and leaves to create a small space where she could rest and hide from the cold night air. Sleep was often shallow, filled with the constant worry that danger might be nearby, wild animals, harsh weather, or even the fear that her own body might fail her. She missed the safety of her home, the warmth of her parents, and the simple feeling of having a roof over her head. Yet she reminded herself that the forest, despite its challenges, was giving her freedom. Freedom from the judgment and cruelty of her village. As the days passed, Amara also discovered moments of unexpected beauty. The sunrise over the hills, the sparkling dew on leaves, and the gentle flow of streams brought her brief moments of peace. She would sometimes sit quietly, letting the sounds of nature wash over her, and for a few precious moments, the fear and sorrow receded. These small joys gave her strength. They reminded her that the world was larger than the narrow judgments of her village, and that life could hold wonder even in the hardest circumstances. Despite the beauty around her, loneliness weighed heavily on Amara's heart. She longed for human contact, for someone to speak to share a word of kindness. Memories of her parents' gentle voices haunted her. She thought of her mother's hands, roughened from work, yet always warm when they held hers. She thought of her father's quiet encouragement, the way he had smiled when she accomplished something small. The absence of these simple comforts made the nights especially difficult. Often she would talk aloud to herself, recounting her days or whispering promises to stay strong. It was not the same as having another person there, but it helped her hold onto her sanity. Amara also reflected on the injustice that had been done to her. She remembered the elders' stern faces, their harsh words, and the way the villagers had turned away without offering help. She felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and confusion. Why had they rejected her simply for being different? Why had her family's protests not been enough? These questions tormented her, but slowly, she began to understand that the problem was not with her, but with their fear of difference. Their beliefs were rigid, and in their minds, she was a danger simply because she did not conform. Understanding this gave her a strange sense of relief. She was not cursed, nor was she wrong. The village's judgment reflected their fears, not her value. Survival required more than physical endurance. It demanded mental strength. Amara learned to observe the patterns of the forest, noticing where animals gathered and which plants were safe to eat. She began marking safe paths with small symbols, ensuring she would not lose her way. When storms came, she learned to recognize signs of changing weather and find shelter quickly. Her body became stronger with each passing day, her muscles toned from climbing, walking, and lifting. Even her mind grew sharper, attuned to the rhythms of nature in ways she had never imagined. Yet the forest was not always kind. One morning, she awoke to heavy rain that soaked her makeshift shelter and chilled her to the bone. Her fire had gone out overnight, leaving her shivering and wet. Hunger and exhaustion gnawed at her resolve. For hours, she tried to stay warm, wrapping herself in leaves and branches, whispering encouragements to herself. She realized that each challenge, no matter how difficult, was teaching her resilience. Every hardship was shaping her into someone who could endure and adapt. One evening, as Amara rested near a stream, she noticed signs of human presence, a faint trail, footprints in the mud, and remnants of tools left behind. Her heart raced with both hope and fear. Humans could mean safety, but they could also bring danger. She remembered the villagers' cruelty and felt a pang of mistrust. Still, her curiosity pushed her forward. She followed the trail cautiously, observing from a distance. The idea of encountering another person, someone who might show kindness, filled her with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Amara also began to think about her future. Being alone in the forest could not last forever. She needed a plan. She considered returning to her village, but the memory of the elders' words and the villagers' judgment made the idea impossible. She realized she could not rely on the place that had rejected her. Instead, she began to dream of a life where she could be safe, respected, and free to live without fear. These dreams became her motivation, fueling her determination to survive and to find a place where she truly belonged. Despite the many challenges, Amara discovered a deep sense of self-reliance. She learned to trust her instincts and make decisions quickly. When faced with difficult choices, whether to cross a dangerous stream, climb a steep hill, or venture into unknown territory, she weighed her options carefully and acted with courage. With each successful decision, her confidence grew. She began to understand that while her body had once made her vulnerable in the eyes of the villagers, it was also her instrument of survival in the wilderness. Evenings became a time of reflection. Amara would sit by the fire she managed to light, staring into the flames as they danced and flickered. She thought about her life, the village that had rejected her, and the challenges she had already overcome. Slowly, she began to feel a sense of pride in her strength and resilience. She realized that she was more capable than she had ever imagined. Each day, she grew stronger, wiser, and more determined to continue, no matter how difficult the path ahead. Amara also discovered the importance of small comforts. She collected flowers and arranged them near her shelter, creating a tiny space of beauty amidst the wilderness. She kept a small journal, writing about her days, her thoughts, and her hopes. These simple acts gave her a sense of normalcy and control, reminding her that even in the hardest circumstances, she could create moments of peace and joy. As the weeks passed, Amara's survival skills improved dramatically. She could find food more easily, navigate the forest with confidence, and protect herself from the elements. Her body, once seen as a liability, had grown strong and resilient. Her mind, sharpened by constant observation and reflection, allowed her to anticipate challenges and respond effectively. She realized that the forest, while harsh and unforgiving, was also teaching her lessons she could never have learned in the village. Through it all, Amara never lost hope. She believed that one day she might find someone who would see her for who she truly was, rather than what others had told them she should be. She imagined meeting someone kind, someone who would offer protection and friendship, someone who would not judge her for being different. These thoughts became a source of comfort and motivation, pushing her to keep going even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. Amara's journey in the wilderness was not just a fight for survival, it was also a journey of self-discovery. She learned the value of resilience, courage, and hope. She realized that even in the face of rejection and hardship, life could still hold moments of beauty, kindness, and possibility. Each challenge she faced made her stronger, and each small victory gave her the confidence to keep moving forward. Though she missed her village and her family deeply, Amara began to understand that her true home was not defined by where she had been, but by the strength, courage, and hope she carried within herself. She had survived banishment, faced the wilderness alone, and discovered a strength she had never known. The path ahead was still uncertain, but she was no longer afraid. She knew that she could endure anything, as long as she held onto her determination and belief in herself. Amara's days in the wilderness were long and lonely, but she had grown stronger, smarter, and more determined with every passing moment. She had learned to find food, build shelters, and navigate the forest, but despite her survival skills, a deep sense of longing remained. She missed human connection, someone who could offer kindness, guidance, or even just a friendly voice. That longing became especially powerful on a cool autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and shadows stretched across the forest floor. She had found a small clearing near a gentle river and was resting after a day of foraging. Her stomach ached from hunger, and her body ached from climbing over fallen trees and rocky hills. As she sat quietly, listening to the soft flow of water, she thought about her parents and the life she had lost. Tears welled in her eyes, but she forced herself to take deep breaths. She reminded herself that she was still alive, that she had survived so much, and that giving up was not an option. It was then that she heard the faint sound of footsteps on the soft earth, careful but deliberate. Her heart raced. Humans could be dangerous. She quickly grabbed a sturdy branch, her makeshift weapon, and moved quietly to a hiding spot behind a tree. Peering through the leaves, she saw a man approaching. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried the calm confidence of someone used to the outdoors. His clothes were simple but sturdy, suitable for long days of hard work in the fields or forests. He seemed cautious, yet there was a gentleness in his movements that made her pause. The man noticed signs of disturbance near the riverbank, broken branches and footprints, and crouched to examine them. Amara held her breath, unsure of whether to reveal herself or remain hidden. The forest felt impossibly quiet, as if the trees themselves were waiting. Then, almost instinctively, she stepped forward. "Please, I don't mean any harm," she whispered. The man straightened and turned toward her, his eyes softening as he took in the sight of the young woman before him. He could see the fatigue in her posture, the dirt on her skin, and the hunger in her eyes. Without a word of judgment, he offered a small smile. "I can help you," he said simply. "Come with me." Amara's instinct was to be cautious. She had learned not to trust easily, not after being rejected by her own people. Yet something in the man's demeanor felt different. There was no accusation in his tone, no hint of fear or suspicion. He simply saw someone in need and offered assistance. Tentatively, she followed him, keeping a careful distance. He led her to his ranch, a modest but well-kept property surrounded by open fields and gentle hills. Cattle grazed peacefully in the distance, and the smell of hay and earth filled the air. For the first time in weeks, Amara felt a sense of safety. The man introduced himself as Ethan. He did not ask questions about her past immediately, understanding that trust had to be earned. Instead, he offered her food, warm water, and a place to rest. The warmth of the small cabin contrasted sharply with the cold nights in the forest, and Amara felt her body relax in a way it hadn't since she was a child. Over the following days, Ethan continued to show her kindness without pressure or expectation. He gave her clean clothes, helped her tend to the land, and taught her basic survival skills that were more refined than her forest methods. Slowly, Amara began to trust him. She realized that not all humans were cruel or judgmental. Some, like Ethan, were capable of empathy, compassion, and protection. Ethan also shared his philosophy of life. "The world is full of people who judge what they do not understand," he said one evening as they repaired a fence together. "But strength comes from seeing the value in life, in every life, no matter what others may say. Sometimes the right thing to do is simply to protect those who cannot protect themselves." His words resonated deeply with Amara, giving her a sense of hope she hadn't felt in months. As the days turned into weeks, Amara began to regain her confidence. Her body, once tired and fragile, grew strong under the steady work and care she received. Her mind, sharpened by months of survival, became more observant and thoughtful. For the first time, she began to dream again, not just of surviving, but of living a full life where she could feel safe and valued. Despite the safety of the ranch, Amara knew she carried the scars of her past. She thought often of her village, of the elders who had cast her out, and of the family she loved but had been powerless to protect. She felt a mixture of sadness and anger, but she also felt determination. She realized that her past did not have to define her future. With Ethan's help, she could begin to build a life that was her own, free from judgment, fear, and rejection. One afternoon, as she worked in the fields, she noticed a sense of peace she had not experienced in years. The sun warmed her face, the wind rustled gently through the trees, and the animals moved calmly around her. She realized that the forest, once a place of danger and loneliness, had prepared her for this moment. Her skills, resilience, and courage were now tools she could use to create a new life. Ethan noticed her reflection and smiled. "You've come a long way," he said. "I knew you could do it." Amara smiled faintly, feeling a sense of pride she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. She understood that the kindness of one person could change the course of a life. Ethan had not just saved her. He had given her hope, safety, and a chance to reclaim her identity. The days continued, each one teaching Amara more about herself and the world beyond her village. She learned to care for the animals, manage the land, and even interact with neighbors who came to trade. Slowly, she began to integrate herself into this new community, feeling acceptance that had always been denied to her. For the first time, she experienced what it truly meant to belong somewhere, not because she conformed, but because she was valued for who she was. Through it all, Amara carried a quiet determination. She knew that someday she might confront her past, share her story, and inspire others who had faced similar rejection. But for now, she allowed herself to heal, to grow, and to trust again. The ranch had become more than a place of safety. It had become a sanctuary, a home, and a space where her strength and resilience could flourish. And so, amidst the rolling hills, the grazing animals, and the warmth of Ethan's care, Amara's new life began. She had survived the wilderness, learned to trust again, and discovered that the human heart was capable of kindness and protection. Though challenges still lay ahead, she no longer faced the world alone. She had found an ally, a protector, and a chance to build a life that was truly hers. Even as Amara built a new life on the ranch, her past was never far from her mind. She thought often of her village, the place where she had been born, the people who had turned against her, and the elders who had cast her out simply for being different. At first, she avoided thinking too deeply about it, focusing on survival and learning new skills. But gradually, the memories surfaced more vividly, and she realized that she could not ignore them forever. The first signs that her story had reached the village came from whispers carried by travelers. Small hints of her survival, glimpses of a young woman living outside the forest, began to circulate. Some villagers were curious, others fearful, and a few expressed regret for having judged her. The elders, however, were alarmed. Their authority had been unquestioned for generations, and the thought that Amara might confront them, or even speak to outsiders about their actions, filled them with dread. Amara wrestled with her emotions. Part of her wanted to return to the village to face the people who had wronged her, to show them that she was strong and capable. Another part feared reopening old wounds, both for herself and for those who had hurt her. She knew that confronting her past would not be easy. It would require courage, careful planning, and emotional strength. But she also realized that avoiding it forever would leave a part of her unresolved. Ethan, noticing her internal struggle, offered quiet guidance. "You don't have to face them alone," he said one evening. "You've survived so much already. If you decide to go back, I will be here to support you. But only you can decide if and when the time is right." His words gave her reassurance. She realized that confronting her past did not mean returning to fear or pain. It meant reclaiming her voice and her power. Amara began preparing herself mentally and emotionally. She reflected on her experiences in the village and the wilderness, and she acknowledged the strength she had gained. Each challenge she had overcome, from surviving alone in the forest to learning the ways of the ranch, had built her resilience. She knew that whatever awaited her, she was stronger than the fears of the past. When she finally decided to share her story, she did so with care and intention. Amara did not seek revenge, nor did she speak with anger. Instead, she recounted her experiences with honesty and clarity, highlighting both the pain of rejection and the lessons of survival. Her words carried the weight of truth, and those who listened were moved by her courage. The villagers' reactions were mixed. Some were shocked and ashamed, realizing that their judgments had been cruel and unfounded. Others were curious and inspired, seeing in Amara a living example of resilience and strength. The elders, confronted with their own misjudgments, could only listen, unable to dismiss the reality of her journey. Through this process, Amara found empowerment. She understood that her life was no longer defined by the rejection she had suffered, but by the choices she had made and the strength she had discovered within herself. By facing her past, she was not only reclaiming her own voice, but also inspiring others who had been marginalized or misunderstood. Her relationship with Ethan remained central during this time. His unwavering support allowed her to approach her past without fear, giving her the confidence to share her story and stand tall. Together, they began thinking about ways to help others who had faced similar hardships, recognizing that compassion and understanding could change lives in ways that judgment and fear never could. Amara realized that the confrontation with her past was not an ending but a turning point. It marked the moment when she fully embraced her identity, her strength, and her future. She had survived banishment, learned to thrive in the wilderness, and discovered the power of human kindness. Now, she had also discovered the power of her own voice. With this newfound clarity, Amara looked ahead with hope. She understood that her journey was far from over, but she also knew that she had the tools, support, and courage to face whatever challenges came next. By embracing her past without fear, she was free to create a life defined not by rejection, but by resilience, compassion, and purpose. Amara had come a long way since the day she was banished from her village. Life on the ranch with Ethan had given her safety, warmth, and the chance to rediscover herself. Yet, she knew that her journey was far from over. Her past would always be a part of her, but now she had the choice to define her future. Each morning she woke with a renewed sense of purpose, eager to contribute to the ranch, learn new skills, and find ways to help others who faced challenges similar to those she had endured. The ranch became more than just a place of safety. It became a home in every sense. Amara spent her days tending to the animals, repairing fences, and learning the rhythms of the land. She discovered a surprising joy in her work, feeding the animals, watching calves take their first steps, and seeing crops grow under her care. With each passing day, she felt stronger, both physically and emotionally. The wilderness she had once feared had prepared her for this life, and the skills she had honed in isolation now gave her confidence and competence. Ethan continued to be her anchor. He treated her with respect, never asking her to explain more than she wanted to, and always offering guidance without judgment. Slowly, Amara began to trust not just him, but herself. She learned to rely on her instincts, to make decisions with confidence, and to navigate challenges with patience and resilience. His kindness had taught her that the world could hold compassion, even when cruelty had once been all she had known. But Amara's journey was not just about survival or comfort. It was about creating meaning and helping others. She realized that her story could inspire and empower those who had experienced rejection or discrimination. With Ethan's encouragement, she began sharing her experiences in thoughtful, gentle ways. She spoke to small gatherings, offering lessons about resilience, self-worth, and the importance of kindness. Her words were not filled with anger or bitterness. Instead, they were grounded in hope and the strength she had discovered within herself. Through these efforts, Amara began to see the profound impact of her story. People who had once felt isolated, misunderstood, or judged reached out to her, seeking guidance or simply comfort in knowing that they were not alone. She listened to their struggles, offered advice, and shared strategies for coping with rejection and finding inner strength. It was a slow process, but each small connection reinforced her sense of purpose. She realized that her past, once a source of pain, could now be transformed into a powerful tool to help others. Amara also embraced her own personal growth and happiness. She allowed herself to experience joy in ways she had never imagined possible. She laughed freely, explored the beauty of the natural world around her, and even celebrated small victories on the ranch. She no longer saw herself as the girl who had been banished, weak and alone. She saw herself as a capable, resilient woman who had survived unimaginable challenges and emerged stronger for it. The community around the ranch began to notice Amara's strength and compassion. Neighbors who once only knew her as a quiet, mysterious girl were drawn to her warmth and insight. They saw how she cared for the land, animals, and people with equal dedication, and they began seeking her guidance in times of need. Amara had become a quiet leader, not through power or authority, but through her actions, her integrity, and her willingness to help. Her past rejection had taught her empathy, patience, and understanding, qualities that now made her invaluable to those around her. Despite all the progress, Amara never forgot the lessons of her past. She often reflected on the village and the elders who had cast her out. She realized that they had acted out of fear and ignorance, not malice. Understanding this allowed her to release lingering anger and resentment. She no longer defined herself by their judgment but by her own strength, choices, and the life she was building. The liberation she felt was profound, a true sense of freedom she had never known as a child. As the years passed, Amara's relationship with Ethan grew into a deep and abiding trust. He had been her protector, her teacher, and her friend during the most vulnerable time of her life. Together, they worked side by side, managing the ranch, nurturing the animals, and supporting the local community. Ethan never sought to overshadow her story or her achievements. Instead, he celebrated her independence and encouraged her to shine. Their partnership was built on mutual respect, shared values, and a commitment to kindness. Amara also embraced opportunities to educate and mentor others. She developed small workshops and gatherings where she taught survival skills, shared her experiences, and encouraged people to embrace their differences. Children and young adults who had faced bullying or rejection found in her a role model and mentor. Amara's story became a beacon of hope, demonstrating that resilience, courage, and compassion could overcome fear, judgment, and adversity. Through her work, she discovered a profound truth. While she could not change the cruelty of the past, she could shape the future. Every person she helped, every lesson she shared, was a small victory over the pain she had once endured. Her life had transformed from one of isolation and fear to one of connection, purpose, and empowerment. She had taken her greatest trials and turned them into tools for building a better world for herself and for others. Amara also found moments of quiet joy in nature. She walked through the fields, watched the sun rise over the hills, and listened to the gentle murmur of the river. These moments reminded her of the beauty and wonder that existed beyond human judgment. She often reflected on the forest where she had survived alone, recognizing that her struggle had taught her skills, patience, and strength that were invaluable in her new life. The wilderness had been harsh, but it had shaped her into the person she had become. As her confidence and influence grew, Amara realized that she no longer needed to fear the past. She had reclaimed her voice, her identity, and her life. The village that had once rejected her no longer held power over her spirit. Instead, she had found a community of kindness, respect, and shared purpose at the ranch and beyond. She understood that true belonging was not about fitting into a rigid mold or meeting others' expectations. It was about living authentically, with courage, integrity, and compassion. In the evenings, Amara and Ethan would sit by the fire, reflecting on the day's work and the lessons learned. They would speak quietly about hopes for the future, the people they had helped, and the life they were building together. Amara often felt a deep sense of gratitude for her survival, for Ethan's kindness, and for the opportunity to create a life that was truly her own. She had endured rejection, fear, and loneliness, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Amara's journey, once defined by hardship and banishment, had transformed into a story of hope and resilience. She had faced the wilderness alone, endured rejection, and confronted her past with courage. Through it all, she discovered the strength within herself and the transformative power of empathy, compassion, and human connection. Her life became a testament to the idea that adversity, when met with courage and determination, can lead to growth, purpose, and profound fulfillment. By the time Amara looked toward the horizon, she understood that her story was no longer just her own. It belonged to all those who had faced judgment, rejection, or isolation. It was a story of survival, resilience, and the transformative power of kindness. She had been banished, abandoned, and judged unfairly, yet she had found safety, trust, and purpose. Her life was proof that even in the darkest moments, hope could thrive, and one person's compassion could change the course of another's life forever. Amara had not just survived, she had flourished. She had reclaimed her life, built a community of love and support, and become a beacon of strength and hope for others. The girl who had once been banished was now a woman who embodied courage, resilience, and compassion. And in her heart, she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was prepared to face them with the same determination and grace that had carried her through the wilderness, into safety, and finally, into a life she could truly call her own.